Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. The rope burned through my gloves as we descended through the shattered glass dome of the Palais Bourbon. 40 feet below, marble floors gleamed under emergency lighting while screams ricocheted off ornate walls built for diplomacy, not warfare. My name is Master Sergeant Nathan Diller, 5th Special Forces Group, Green Beret. Until 3 hours ago, I was running morning PT at our forward operating base outside Ramstein. Now I was fast roping into hell. 30 seconds, I called into my throat mic, watching Staff Sergeant Nelson hit the floor first, weapon up, scanning for threats. The other 4 members of my team followed in textbook sequence. Sergeant First Class Grant, our medic, Staff Sergeant Brooks, communications, Sergeant John, our youngest but sharpest shooter, and Sergeant First Class Hassan, demolitions expert who could blow a door or build a bridge depending on what the mission required. We weren't supposed to be here. The Secret Service had this locked down tight, or so they claimed. French GIGN units controlled the perimeter. Local police maintained outer cordons, standard diplomatic protection protocol. But protocols meant nothing when people started eating each other in the metro stations. My boots hit marble with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the entire building. The rope retraction system whined as our Black Hawk pulled away, disappearing into smoke-filled skies above a city that had been civilized 12 hours ago. Now Paris burned, and we had one mission: extract Vice President William Harrison and get him to the C-17 waiting at a secured airstrip outside Versailles. "Contact 12 o'clock, Nelson whispered, his M4 trained on an archway leading deeper into the building. A figure stumbled into view. The thing that had been a man moved with disjointed lurches, arms hanging. Half its face was missing, leaving wet bone gleaming under the chandelier light. "Jesus," Walsh breathed beside me. I'd seen enough combat footage to know what we were dealing with. The briefing had been clinical, efficient, aggressive viral agent causing total breakdown of higher brain functions while leaving motor responses intact. Subjects exhibited extreme hostility toward uninfected humans. Transmission through bodily fluid contact. No known treatment. Eliminate on sight. The infected thing turned toward us, drawn by John's voice, its remaining eye fixed on our position with terrible focus. It opened what remained of its mouth and released a sound that belonged in nightmares. A wet, gurgling moan that seemed to vibrate through the floor itself. "Suppressed fire only," I ordered. "We go loud, we draw every infected in this place." Nelson's weapon coughed once. The infected dropped, black fluid spreading across expensive Italian marble. But the damage was done. That moan had been answered from somewhere deeper in the building. Then again, and again. "Movement," Grant reported, monitoring the stairwell. "Multiple contacts, upper floors." Brooks was already working his radio, trying to establish communication with the Secret Service detail. Static answered him. He switched frequencies, tried again, more static. "Comms are fried," he reported. "Something's jamming everything below UHF band." That complicated things considerably. No communication meant no coordination with other security elements. We were operating blind in a building full of infected, looking for one man in what had become a maze of marble corridors and panicked survivors. Intel said the VP was in the blue room, Hassan noted, consulting the building schematic we'd memorized during the flight. "3rd floor, east wing." Intel also said this place was secure, John replied grimly. I studied our surroundings more carefully. Blood smears on the walls told a story of violence and panic. Overturned furniture suggested people had tried to barricade themselves. The metallic scent of blood mixed with something else. Decay, human waste, fear itself seemed to have a smell. "We move as a unit," I decided. "Standard entry protocols. Anyone not wearing a badge gets evaluated before approach. Anyone showing symptoms gets put down immediately." We'd trained for hostile building clearing countless times, but never with the added complication of infected civilians who might look normal until they tried to tear your throat out. The building's layout worked against us. Long corridors with limited sight lines, numerous rooms and alcoves where threats could hide, multiple staircases that could become bottlenecks or ambush points. The central staircase was a work of art, all carved stone and gilt railings. It was also completely exposed, offering no cover if we encountered hostiles above. But it was the fastest route to the third floor. "John, your point," I ordered. "Grant, rear security. Everyone else, watch your sectors." We moved up the stairs in a tactical formation that had been drilled into us through years of training. Each man covered a specific zone, weapons trained on potential threat areas. Our boots made minimal noise on the stone steps, but in the quiet of the building, even whispers seemed amplified. Halfway up, we heard voices, human voices speaking rapidly in French. Relief flooded through me until I recognized the tone. Argument, not coordination. Panic, not control. GIGN, Nelson identified, catching fragments of tactical French. They're arguing about fallback positions. That meant the French Special Forces were still operational but stressed. Good news for us, potentially. But it also meant they might shoot first and ask questions later if they encountered unidentified armed personnel in their area of operations. The second-floor landing opened onto a corridor lined with offices and meeting rooms. Several doors hung open, revealing overturned furniture and scattered papers. One room showed clear signs of violence. A conference table flipped on its side, chairs scattered, dark stains on the carpet that could only be blood. "Clear left," Grant reported. "Clear right," John confirmed. But something felt wrong. The building was too quiet for the number of people who should have been here. A diplomatic summit meant dozens of staff members, security personnel, support crews. We'd encountered one infected and heard voices from the French team. But where was everyone else? Brooks held up a closed fist, freezing our movement. He pointed to his ear, then down the corridor. We all heard it then, a sound like rustling leaves, but wrong, too wet, too organic. The sound came from behind a heavy wooden door marked with an elaborate brass nameplate. Through the gap at the bottom, I could see movement. Not the purposeful movement of people trying to hide, but something more disturbing. "On me," I whispered, approaching the door. The brass handle turned easily, too easily. The door swung open to reveal a scene that would haunt my dreams for whatever remained of my life. The room had been some kind of reception area, elegant furniture arranged for conversation and refreshments. Now it was an abattoir. Bodies lay scattered across Persian rugs, but they weren't still. They twitched and writhed in ways that human bodies shouldn't move. Some were missing limbs. Others had chunks torn from torsos. All of them were trying to get up. The rustling sound came from their attempts at movement, fabric rubbing against carpet as they struggled with motor functions that no longer quite worked. But their eyes, milky. "Back out," I ordered quietly, slow and steady. But John was staring, his weapon wavering. "Those people, they're not people anymore," I said firmly. "Move." One of the infected managed to roll over, exposing a throat that had been torn open but somehow still functioned enough to produce that horrible moaning sound. The others responded, their movements becoming more coordinated as they sensed prey nearby. We backed out of the room and I pulled the door shut, but not before seeing them starting to rise. Whatever had happened in that reception area, it had happened recently. The blood was still wet. Third floor, I decided. Fast and quiet. We took the steps two at a time, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind us, the sound of the infected trying to break down the door provided unwelcome urgency. They might not be smart, but they were persistent. The third-floor corridor stretched before us like something from a museum. Oil paintings of French historical figures, marble busts on pedestals, ornate sconces providing pools of amber light. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Now it felt like a trap. Blue room should be at the end. Hassan pointed toward heavy double doors flanked by French flags. But between us and those doors, the corridor was blocked. A barricade had been constructed from furniture, paintings, and what looked like pieces of a shattered marble statue. Behind it, I could make out movement and hear voices, American accents mixing with French, tension evident in every syllable. "Federal agents," I called out in English. "Green Beret team, here for extraction." The voices stopped. After a moment, a head appeared above the barricade, a man in his 40s with the bearing and haircut of Secret Service. "You're not part of the approved security detail," he said, his sidearm visible but not aimed directly at us. "Approved security went out the window when this place became infested," I replied. "We're here on direct orders to extract the vice president." "From who?" I gave him the authorization codes we'd been provided. After a tense moment, he gestured to someone behind the barricade. The improvised wall began to shift as furniture was moved aside. "Agent Travis," he introduced himself as we squeezed through the gap. "This is Agent Kelly, Agent Baker, and Agent Park. We've been holding this position for 3 hours." Behind the barricade, the situation was grim but controlled. The agents had turned the end of the corridor into a defensive position, with clear sight lines back toward the stairwell and multiple fallback routes planned. Professional work. "Where's the VP?" I asked. Travis's expression darkened. "In the blue room, with instructions not to be disturbed. He's on a secure call with Washington, trying to coordinate response to this situation." The way he said "situation" told me everything I needed to know about how well those coordination efforts were going. "We need to move him now," I said. "This building isn't secure. Infected are already inside. And it's only a matter of time before—" A new sound cut through our conversation. Distant at first, but growing closer. The rhythmic thudding of helicopter rotors, but wrong, irregular, labored. Through the tall windows, we could see smoke rising from multiple points across Paris. Some of those smoke columns were too large, too dark to be anything but major fires. "The evacuation helicopters," Agent Kelly said quietly. "They've been trying to get people out, but—" She didn't need to finish. If helicopters were crashing, it meant the air evacuation routes were compromised. It meant our own extraction timeline just got much shorter. The double doors to the blue room opened with ceremonial weight, revealing a space designed to intimidate. Heavy curtains, a table that could seat 20, portraits of French presidents staring down with painted authority. And there, at the head of the table with a secure satellite phone pressed to his ear, sat Vice President William Backman. He was a big man, former college football player who'd kept himself in decent shape despite 20 years in Washington politics. Right now, he looked every one of his 62 years, stress lines deep around his eyes as he argued with whoever was on the other end of that phone call. "I don't care what the Joint Chiefs are recommending," he was saying. "We cannot abandon our allies in Europe just because some virus has gotten out of hand. The optics alone—" "Mr. Vice President," Agent Travis interrupted. "These men are here to extract you." Backman looked up, taking in our tactical gear and weapons with obvious irritation. "I'm in the middle of coordinating our response to this crisis. Whatever you gentlemen think you're here for, it can wait." I stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, this building is compromised. We have infected inside the perimeter, communication systems are down, and extraction routes are closing by the hour. We need to move you to a secure location immediately." "Young man," Backman replied in the tone politicians use when they think they're explaining something to a child, "I appreciate your concern, but I have responsibilities that extend beyond my personal safety. The American people need leadership right now, not the appearance of their vice president running from—" An explosion somewhere in the distance rattled the windows, cutting off his speech. Through the heavy glass, we could see orange flames rising from what looked like the Eiffel Tower's general direction. Brooks had been monitoring his radio with one earpiece, face growing steadily more grim. "Sir," he interrupted, "I'm picking up emergency broadcasts on civilian bands. Multiple government facilities across Europe have gone dark. The virus isn't contained to Paris. It's everywhere." Backman's secure phone rang. He answered with obvious frustration. "Yes? What? When?" His face went white. "Are you certain?" Christ. Yes, I understand. He set the phone down carefully, the weight of whatever he'd just learned evident in every movement. London has fallen, he said quietly. The Prime Minister is missing. Rome is under military lockdown, but they're reporting containment failures. Madrid, Barcelona, Brussels, all reporting massive outbreaks. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of gunfire somewhere in the city below. What had started as a localized incident was clearly something much larger, much worse. "Sir," I said firmly, "we have a C-17 waiting at a secured airstrip. Right now, that represents your best chance of reaching safety and continuing to coordinate response efforts. But our window is closing." Bachman stood, but his expression remained stubborn. "I'm not abandoning my post while American citizens are in danger. There are embassy staff throughout the city. Business travelers, tourists. They're depending on their government to—" Another explosion, closer this time. Close enough to shake dust from the ornate ceiling moldings. Agent Travis stepped forward. "Sir, dead leaders can't help anyone. The Master Sergeant is right, we need to move." But Bachman was already shaking his head. "I'll move to a more secure location in the city if necessary, but I'm not fleeing the country. Not while there are still Americans who need help." I'd dealt with difficult VIPs before, but never in a situation this dire. Every minute we spent arguing was a minute closer to those infected breaking through whatever defenses remained. Every minute was a minute closer to losing our extraction window entirely. Through the windows, Paris continued to burn, and somewhere in those burning streets, millions of people were discovering that the world they'd known that morning no longer existed. The Vice President's stubbornness was about to get us all killed. The sound of shattering glass from somewhere below made the decision for us. Brooks's radio crackled with static-filled transmissions, fragments of panicked French voices reporting breaches throughout the building. The infected had found more ways inside. "Sir," Agent Travis said urgently, "we need to move. Now." Vice President Bachman stood rigid behind the conference table, his jaw set in that stubborn line I'd seen too many times in difficult politicians. "I told you, I'm not abandoning." The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing the blue room in dim red illumination that made everything look like a scene from hell. In that moment of darkness, we'd all heard it. The sound of multiple bodies hitting the floor somewhere in the building, followed by screams that cut off too abruptly. "The main power grid's been compromised," Brooks reported, monitoring his equipment. "Backup generators are running, but they won't last long with the load from all the security systems. I made the tactical decision every Green Beret is trained to make when situations deteriorate beyond acceptable parameters. Mr. Vice President, we're leaving. You can walk out with us, or I can have Sergeant Hassan carry you. Your choice." Bachman's face flushed red in the emergency lighting. "You cannot compel me to—" A new sound cut through his protest. Footsteps in the corridor outside, too many to count, moving with irregular rhythm. Not the coordinated movement of security personnel, but the shambling gait we'd learned to recognize. Agent Kelly appeared at the barricaded entrance, her face pale. Multiple contacts approaching from the main stairwell. They've overrun the second floor. I drew my sidearm and moved to the window, looking down at the street below. What I saw made my blood freeze. The Avenue de l'Université stretched before us, but it was no longer empty. Hundreds of infected wandered between abandoned vehicles, their movements creating a grotesque parody of foot traffic. Some wore business suits, others hospital scrubs, a few still in police uniforms. All of them bore the telltale signs, the slack-jawed expressions, the dark stains covering their clothing. "LZ is compromised," I reported into my throat mic, hoping our helicopter pilot was still monitoring. "Street level is overrun, we need alternate extraction." Static answered me. Then faintly, "Diller, this is Bird, can't hold position. Too hot." More static, then nothing. "Pilot's breaking off," I announced to the room. "We're on our own for extraction." The scratching sounds at the door were getting louder. Through the heavy wood, we could hear the infected pressing against the barricade, drawn by our voices and the light leaking from under the door. The furniture we'd stacked wouldn't hold them for long. Hassan moved to the window beside me, studying the drop. 40 feet to the courtyard. Rope descent is doable, but we'd be exposed during the drop. And that courtyard connects directly to the street. "How many rounds do we have?" I asked. My team checked their magazines with practiced efficiency. The count wasn't encouraging. Maybe 200 rounds total between 5 operators. Against hundreds of infected, that wouldn't last long. Nelson positioned himself at the door, listening to the growing sounds of the infected trying to break through. Contact sounds are increasing. Multiple hostiles, maybe dozens. Grant was checking his medical supplies, jaw tight with concentration. "If anyone gets bit, I've got morphine. That's about all I can do." The vice president had gone quiet, finally beginning to understand the reality of our situation. He moved to the window, staring down at the street full of infected with dawning horror. "My God," he whispered. "There are so many of them." Agent Travis checked his service weapon grimly. "Sir, whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. That barricade won't hold much longer." I studied our options with the clinical detachment that had kept me alive through multiple combat deployments. The building was compromised, the street was overrun, and our extraction bird had been forced to abort. But Green Berets are trained to adapt and overcome. "New plan," I announced. "We move to the roof. Extract from there." "The roof access is on the 4th floor," Agent Park pointed out. "We'd have to go up, through more of the building." "Better than trying to fight through hundreds of infected at street level," I replied. "Hassan, you've got the building schematics memorized. What's the fastest route to roof access?" Hassan consulted his mental map of the Palais Bourbon, service stairwell at the north end. "It's narrower than the main stairs, easier to defend if we encounter hostiles." A loud crack from the door made us all turn. The barricade was shifting as the infected pressed against it with mindless persistence. One of the furniture legs was starting to splinter. "Move," I ordered. "John, your point. Grant, stay with the VP. Everyone else, standard formation." We gathered our gear and moved toward the room's secondary exit, a door that led to a service corridor connecting to the north wing. Vice President Bachman followed without further argument, finally understanding that his options had narrowed to survival or death. The service corridor was darker than the main hallways, lit only by emergency strips that cast eerie red shadows on the walls. Our boots echoed off marble floors despite our attempts at stealth. But stealth was becoming less important than speed. Halfway to the north stairwell, we encountered our first group of infected. 3 of them blocked the corridor ahead. A woman in an elegant dress that was now torn and stained with blood. A man in a chef's uniform with half his face missing, and what had once been a security guard. "Suppressed fire," I whispered. John's weapon coughed 3 times. All 3 infected dropped, but the sound of bodies hitting marble seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. "More coming," Nelson reported, watching our 6 from behind. I turned to see shapes emerging from the shadows of the corridor we'd just traversed. The infected moved with that terrible persistence, drawn by the sound of our weapons and the scent of living flesh. "Stairs," I decided. "Fast." We picked up the pace, moving through the palace corridors with tactical precision but increasing urgency. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, the scraping of feet on marble, the wet breathing sounds the infected made, the occasional moan that seemed to echo through the entire building. The north stairwell was a narrow spiral of stone steps that twisted upward into darkness. Emergency lighting provided minimal illumination, creating pools of red light separated by threatening shadows. "Single file," I ordered. "Watch the angles." We climbed with weapons ready, each step taking us further from the relative safety of ground level, but closer to possible extraction. The vice president climbed in the middle of our formation, his breathing heavy. Whatever else I might think of his political decisions, the man had physical courage. Halfway up to the 4th floor, we heard them. The infected had found the stairwell. The sound of multiple bodies entering the narrow space below us was unmistakable. The scraping of clothing against stone walls, the irregular footsteps, the breathing that wasn't quite human anymore. There in the stairwell, Grant reported unnecessarily. "Keep climbing," I replied. We maintained distance and reached the roof. But the infected were climbing too, and they didn't get tired. We reached the 4th floor landing, breathing hard from the rapid ascent and the stress of knowing we were being pursued. The roof access door stood before us. Heavy steel with an electronic lock that was now dead due to the power failure. Hassan moved to the door, pulling tools from his kit. "Give me 2 minutes for the lock." "You've got one," I replied, listening to the sounds from the stairwell. The infected were getting closer. John positioned himself at the stairwell opening, weapon trained downward. "Contact," he whispered. "Multiple hostiles ascending." The narrow confines of the stairwell worked in our favor. They could only come up 1 or 2 at a time. But it also meant we were trapped with limited escape routes. Hassan's tools worked on the electronic lock with practiced precision. "Almost got it," he muttered. The first infected appeared at the landing, a man in a torn business suit who might have been a diplomat or bureaucrat hours ago. Now he was something that moved with single-minded hunger, reaching toward John with hands that ended in broken fingernails. John's suppressed shot dropped him, but more were coming. "Hurry," I told Hassan. The lock clicked open. "Got it," Hassan announced, pulling the door open to reveal another set of stairs leading upward. "Move," I ordered. We filed through the door rapidly, Vice President Bachman keeping pace despite his age and stress. As soon as we were through, Hassan slammed the door shut and engaged the manual lock from the inside. The roof access stairs were shorter but steeper, leading to a final door marked with warnings in French about authorized personnel only. Hassan made quick work of this lock as well, and suddenly we were emerging onto the roof of the Palais Bourbon. The scene that greeted us was like something from an apocalyptic film. Paris stretched before us in all directions, and the city was burning. Columns of black smoke rose from dozens of locations. In the distance, we could see the Eiffel Tower wreathed in flames. Emergency vehicle sirens wailed continuously, creating a symphony of chaos that carried on the October wind. Brooks was already working his radio, trying to re-establish contact with our extraction assets. Any station. This is Green Team requesting immediate rooftop extraction at Palais Bourbon coordinates." Static answered him for several seconds before a voice broke through. "Green Team, this is Blackhawk 77. We're airborne but taking fire from multiple positions. The city it's gone to hell down there. 7-7, we need immediate pickup. Rooftop of Palais Bourbon. 5 operators plus VIP package. Negative on rooftop extraction. Too much hostile fire. Too many obstructions. We can attempt pickup at street level. Avenue de l'Université intersection." I looked over the roof edge at the street below. The infected had multiplied. What had been hundreds was now easily 1,000 or more, a slow-moving sea of former humanity that filled the avenue from building to building. "That's going to be a problem," I muttered. Vice President Bachman joined me at the roof edge, staring down at the infected masses below. "How are we supposed to get through all of that?" "Very carefully," I replied. "And very fast." The sound of splintering wood from below told us that the infected had broken through the door we'd locked behind us. They were in the building's upper levels now, and it was only a matter of time before they found the roof access. 7-7, confirm you can reach Avenue intersection for pickup? I asked into the radio. "Affirmative, but you'll need to clear a landing zone. I can't set down with hostiles in the immediate area. Clear a landing zone in a street full of infected zombies, with 5 operators, limited ammunition, and a VIP who'd never fired a shot in anger. Roger 7-7, give us 10 minutes to reach the LZ." I turned to my team, studying each face in the flickering light from the burning city. These were men I'd trained with, deployed with, trusted with my life with. Now I was about to ask them to walk into what looked like certain death. "Gentlemen," I said quietly, "we're going down into that street. We're going to fight our way to the intersection, clear an LZ, and extract our package. Questions?" Hassan checked his remaining magazines. "Just one, sir. When we get to the street, do we try to move quietly or go loud?" I looked down at the infected masses below, then at Vice President Bachman, who was watching our conversation with growing understanding of what we were about to attempt. We go loud, I decided. Fast and loud, straight through the middle, shock and momentum. Hooah, my team responded in unison. The sound of footsteps from the stairwell below was getting closer. Time was running out. We moved to the building's edge, where Hassan rigged a fast rope descent system using climbing gear from his pack. The drop to street level was substantial, but manageable for trained operators. "Sir," I addressed the vice president directly, "you're going to rappel down this rope with Sergeant Grant. Do exactly what he tells you, when he tells you to do it. Our lives depend on following orders precisely." Bachman nodded, his face pale. "I understand." The plan was simple in its desperation. Fast rope to street level. Form a protective formation around the VP. Fight through the infected to the intersection. Hold position until extraction arrived. Simple, but not easy. John went first, dropping rapidly to the street and immediately engaging targets with precise headshots. The sound of his suppressed weapon was almost lost in the ambient noise of the burning city. Hassan followed, then Nelson. By the time Grant and the vice president reached street level, we had a small perimeter established in the chaos. The infected reacted to our presence immediately. The ones closest to our landing point turned toward us with that horrible focused hunger. But they moved slowly, and we had trained for urban combat in hostile environments. "Formation Alpha," I ordered, taking point. "VP in the center, overlapping fields of fire." We began moving toward the intersection, each step carefully coordinated. The infected pressed in from all sides, but our disciplined fire kept them at manageable distance. Headshots only. Center mass was useless against enemies that didn't feel pain or shock. The vice president kept pace in the center of our formation, his breathing controlled despite the terror that must have been coursing through him. Whatever his political failings, William Bachman had courage when it mattered. Halfway to the intersection, we encountered our first serious resistance. A group of infected had clustered around an overturned car, and our movement drew their attention en masse. Suddenly, we were facing not individual threats, but a coordinated mass of enemies. "Contact front," Nelson called out, his weapon chattering in controlled bursts. "Contact left," Hassan added, engaging targets that were trying to flank our formation. I was about to order increased rate of fire when the vice president did something that changed everything. Instead of staying in position as ordered, he broke from formation and ran toward what he thought was an open path through the infected. His movement drew every zombie in visual range directly toward our position. "Backman," I shouted, but he was already 20 feet away, running toward what was clearly a trap. The infected converged on his position with renewed energy. Vice President Bachman stumbled, fell, and for a terrifying moment I thought we'd lost him. But he rolled behind an abandoned vehicle just as the infected reached his position. "Damn it," I cursed, making the tactical decision that would haunt me for years. "Hassan, Grant, maintain perimeter. John, Nelson, we're going after him." We fought our way through the infected mass toward the vice president's position. Every step cost ammunition we couldn't spare. Every second increased the likelihood that our extraction bird would abort. We found Bachman crouched behind a police car, surrounded by infected that were clawing at the vehicle's windows and doors. His face was white with terror, but he was uninjured. The sound of helicopter rotors was getting closer. 7-7, this is Green Team. We're at the LZ, but situation is deteriorating rapidly. Copy, Green Team. I can see your position. Setting down in 30 seconds. 30 seconds to clear a landing zone in a street full of infected zombies. I made the hardest decision of my military career. Moving swiftly around the police car, I reached Vice President Bachman in 2 steps. Before he could react, I drew back my fist and struck him squarely in the nose. The cartilage crunched under the impact, blood spurted, and he dropped unconscious. "What the hell, Diller?" Grant shouted over the chaos. "He's going to get us all killed," I replied, hefting the unconscious vice president over my shoulder in a fireman's carry. Sometimes you have to save people from themselves. The helicopter was setting down now, its rotor wash scattering debris and creating a hurricane of dust and paper that confused the infected. Our window of opportunity was measured in seconds. "Move," I ordered, carrying the dead weight of the vice president toward the landing helicopter. My team laid down covering fire as we ran the final 50 yards to extraction. Hassan's demolitions training proved useful as he lobbed fragmentation grenades into the densest concentrations of infected, clearing our path with devastating efficiency. The helicopter's crew chief was gesturing frantically for us to hurry. Over the rotor noise and gunfire, I could hear him shouting about fuel and flight time. John reached the bird first, providing security as Grant and Hassan climbed aboard. Nelson maintained rear guard, picking off infected that got too close to our extraction point. I heaved the unconscious vice president into the helicopter and climbed in after him. Nelson dove through the door just as the pilot pulled collective and lifted us away from the nightmare below. As we gained altitude, I looked down at the burning city of Paris. The infection had spread faster than anyone had predicted. Emergency services had collapsed. Military cordons had failed. What had been one of the world's great cities 12 hours ago was now a monument to humanity's fragility. Vice President Bachmann stirred as we reached cruising altitude, his broken nose causing him obvious pain. When he opened his eyes and saw me, his expression was pure rage. "You struck me," he said through the blood and swelling. "You broke my nose." "Yes, sir," I replied without emotion. "Your actions endangered the mission and my men. I corrected the problem. This is assault on a federal official. I'll have you court-martialed." I looked at him steadily. "Sir, with respect, there might not be a government left to court-martial anyone. Look outside." He turned to the helicopter's window and stared down at the devastation below. Paris was dying. Smoke rose from hundreds of fires. The streets were rivers of infected humanity. In the distance, military aircraft were dropping ordnance on what had been residential neighborhoods. The pilot's voice came through our headsets. "ETA to Versailles airstrip is 15 minutes. C-17 is fueled and ready for immediate departure to Andrews Air Force Base." "What's the situation in the States?" I asked. The pilot's hesitation told me everything. "Reports are mixed, sir. Multiple outbreaks on the East Coast. CDC has gone to emergency protocols. Military is implementing martial law in several metropolitan areas." Vice President Bachmann listened to this with growing horror. The political implications were staggering, but the human cost was beyond calculation. "How many cities?" he asked quietly. "Sir, based on radio traffic, we're looking at simultaneous outbreaks in New York, Washington, Boston, Atlanta, Miami, and Chicago. Possible cases in Los Angeles, Seattle, and Denver." The scope of the disaster was almost incomprehensible. What had started as a localized incident in Europe had somehow become a global catastrophe. As we approached the Versailles airstrip, I could see the C-17 waiting with engines running. Security teams had established a perimeter, but even from the air I could see infected wandering in the tree lines around the facility. "Looks like we're getting out just in time," Nelson observed. The transfer from helicopter to transport aircraft took less than 5 minutes. Vice President Bachmann walked under his own power, his broken nose a visible reminder of the day's events. As we strapped in for takeoff, he sat beside me with something that might have been respect in his eyes. "Master Sergeant," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology and probably my life." "Just doing my job, sir." "No," he replied, looking out the aircraft window as we lifted off from what had been France. "You did more than that. You made the hard choices when I couldn't." The C-17 banked west, carrying us away from a continent that was falling into chaos. Below us, the lights of civilization flickered and died as the infected spread like wildfire through populations that had no idea what was coming. As we crossed over the Atlantic, heading toward a homeland that might already be lost, I reflected on the mission. We'd extracted our package. All my men had survived. By any tactical measure, it had been a success. But looking at Vice President Bachmann's broken nose and thinking about the millions of people we'd left behind in that burning city, success felt like a hollow concept. The real war was just beginning. When we landed at Andrews Air Force Base 6 hours later, we discovered that the United States of America was already fighting for its life. But that's another story. For now, the mission was complete. The package was delivered.